Callum, do you want to start, or will it be?
I think it's going to be Ed that starts, so I'm sure Ed can introduce himself, and I'll try and work out the sharing of screen whilst he's doing that.
Hello there. So apologies I didn't join you. I mean, I seem to get stuck on 92% and arranging the chairs for the meeting. So as WebEx was doing its thing. So hi there. My name is Ed Dunn. I have been leading the processing of 2021 census and will hopefully continue to do that through to output. So we're really pleased to be here. You are a really important group for us, as you probably already know. But you as representing a really significant group of commercial users of this data will help to realise much and a lot of the benefit of why we go to the expense of collecting it. And pleased to be back here. Previously, I spent over a decade in the social survey space of ONS, and pleased to be back with your group and. In fact, somewhere in our office in Newport, we have the old deprivation map of London that Keith gave us for a long time ago for getting I think it was output area classifications onto the social survey data. So I can't say I've seen that picture for 18 months or so. So must make sure when we get back into the office that it's still got pride of place in the old social survey space. But today's all about census and what comes after census as well, because that's an important part of our strategic future and one which you will be very interested in. So I'm pleased that Callum, who is leading on dissemination of census results, and Vicky, who leads our engagement space on what comes next, have joined us well. I'll just give you a brief overview. You probably know much of what I'm going to say already, but our collection exercise was extremely successful in the circumstances, and I think where we left it in when fieldwork and the collection operation closed down, we felt that we were on track for an extremely successful census. And I think everything that we are seeing as we process the data supports that, notwithstanding that there will be a range of issues, as there always are, that require attention, and there will be important information that users will want to be aware of as you use that data. And I'm sure that we will come to that, if not in our presentation, in some of the questions that you'll have around pandemic impacts and the like. But we achieved around about a 97% overall return rate from occupied addresses. We carried new questions on sexual orientation, gender identity, and veterans. Our digital first online census was a real success, and almost 90% of the household responses came online. We are conducting and are absolutely in the midst of this, the most comprehensive QA exercise that the office has ever undertaken. I am sure you've probably heard from us previously about the range of administrative data, both public and commercial sources, that we have got access to now as a statistical organisation. And the Digital Economy Act of a good few years ago is absolutely pivotal to that. But we are comparing and contrasting census data with the widest range of admin sources and commercial sources we have ever done. And in the next 3 weeks or so, we will be providing access to provisional estimates to local government and involving them directly in the quality assurance for the first time. Next slide, please, Callum. So the legislative journey for the content and approach had unfortunately completed prior to the pandemic arriving. So there was a limit to what we could do with the questionnaire. We would have, I guess, potentially liked to make more change to questions had that been possible. But the Census Act, as you probably know, takes quite a while to implement the legislation, which is very, very detailed down to individual wording of questions and response options. So and then on top of that, with form printing and the like, we were far too advanced to be able to change questions. There was a rigorous assessment done of whether it was safe and valid to continue, and you'll probably have read the statements and reports that we put out at the time about how we were confident that we could still deliver a great census despite the circumstances within which we found ourselves. So a number of adaptations were made, a whole bunch of operational responses delivered for the field force operation. Where guidance, we did some very good and quick qualitative work with the public about where additional guidance may be necessary for the public to understand the questions that we were asking in the context of the pandemic, and we were able to amend online guidance for various questions, and a whole bunch of activities since, including more follow-up surveys, particularly for the student populations, than we have ever done before. So we have engaged with every single university and boarding school and FE college with accommodation to make sure that we really understood what was going on in their localities and their accommodation at the time of the census. I don't know whether those links work, but I'm sure you've got these slides. I think so. You will be able to link to all of those reports, and clearly, if there's anything in any of those that strike a chord or generate any questions, then you can follow up with us afterwards. Next slide, please. So this is where broadly we are heading in terms of output. So our first results will be published early summer. They will be relatively high level. The intention is local authority estimates by age and sex at that time, quickly followed by a whole bunch of what we call univariate data. So this is analysis. And moving through to a whole bunch of kind of canned products, area profiles, and the like, which Callum will talk more about. And as we move towards the end of the year, we will see more and more multivariate and more complex analysis based on the usual resident population from autumn, and then probably towards the very back end of the year and into 2023, we'll see those products that are based on alternative population bases, small population data, the origin destination data becoming available. But there are plans for, we don't have any of our analytical colleagues with us today, unfortunately, but what we do have coming out is imminently, as a response by the end of the month, as a response to the outputs and analysis consultation, which will set out our plans for those further analytical products. And also then, when we've completed the local authority exercise, as I mentioned at the beginning, we will publish a precise range of what and when will come out once we are able to commit to that publication of first results, precise date, and the rest will then be scheduled thereafter. If we move on, I think actually that might be me done. So what I will say here, though, and as we hand over to Callum to talk about dissemination, is that clearly the cost and effort means nothing unless we get the results into the hands of users like yourselves in ways which allow you to use the information to improve decision making and planning in your in your organizations and the great many number of other organizations and users that we have. The cost and effort really is only worthwhile if you're able to make use of the data in the way in which you told us when we set out to design and implement the census in the first place. And what you'll hear now is how we plan to do that.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Should I just continue and maybe questions at the end?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I thought I'd talk a little bit around how we think about users, products, and then kind of show you some examples of the sort of the ways in which we plan to disseminate census data. So I won't go through this in any detail, but we use personas. I imagine organizations like yourselves probably use similar sort of things to characterize kind of users or customers. And in terms of how we think about users, kind of going left to right, we have the more kind of technical users, maybe people who kind of consume data in bulk through APIs, that sort of thing. Expert analysts, so where the professional, if you like, kind of researchers and statisticians. All these users, all these personas rather, can be in a variety of different places. So we're characterizing users by what they do, if you like, rather than where they work. Moving to people like kind of policy influencers. So we're starting to get through more to people where kind of statistics and research probably isn't their main job. So a policy influencer might be an expert in health or education or something like that, but needs statistics in order to understand the situation and track change and so on. Through to what we refer to as an information forager, maybe someone again who it's a task they have to do every now and then, maybe to go and find a set of numbers and move them from A to B, perhaps in a local authority in terms of the latest population figures for the local planning report or something like that. And then in terms of the citizen, we divide them into two types: the inquiring, so a citizen who wants to go and get the data themselves, form their own opinion, if you like, from what they see as facts, through to kind of passive citizens who maybe just kind of consume information, if you like, through their chosen media. So that's how we kind of think about users, and very, in a very general sense, the more towards the left, users kind of really want to get their hands on the data. Yeah, they want to be kind of unhindered, if you like, just get access to the numbers and just let me explore the numbers and analyze it and so on. As we move further to the right, the users tend to perhaps need more help, help understand, tell stories, those sorts of things. So they're less perhaps kind of able and willing, if you like, to be able to kind of go back to the raw numbers and produce their own analysis and understanding from it. So in terms of the products which we then look to create, we kind of have them in these kind of four main buckets, if you like. So we have the data itself. I'll talk a little bit about some innovations that were planned there. We talk about commentary. So you may have seen these on the ONS website. So we have statistical bulletins, which basically describe here's a release of data, broadly the highlights, if you like, or the headlines of these. And then what we refer to as exploratory and explanatory products. So exploratory are products where are tools, quite often data visualizations, where users kind of interact with the data, see it graphically or on a map and so on. And then explanatory. So explanatory products are where we look to tell stories. So there's a technique we're starting to use called scrollytelling. So basically you kind of scroll through a story, perhaps on an iPad, something like that, and the sort of story and the information unfolds as you kind of scroll down the kind of product. And then there's obviously a relationship between those personas and those products. It's not a one-to-one relationship, but again, access to the data and sort of hands-on analysis and so on is more to those users on the left. And the kind of explanatory products, if you like, more geared towards the citizen type users. So what I want to do is just kind of pick out a few things that we're planning to do, and you may have heard about some of these, or perhaps you might have seen some of them before. The first of those is around us looking to make access to the data more flexible. So what we're talking about here is traditionally we've produced and through consultation agreed a set of standard outputs that get produced from the census, and that's always a bit of a compromise because different users have different needs, want different combinations of variables together, different categories, all those sorts of things, quite rightly so. And we are still looking to essentially do that, to create a set of ready-made tables, not too dissimilar from the local characteristics from 2011, because that provides a set of data which is comparable across. We produce it for each and every area, so you can do those comparisons across space if you like. And also in terms of design of those, we'll make them broadly comparable to the local characteristic tables from 2011. But what we're adding this time round is the ability for users to essentially create their own data tables. So select their own variables, and there's a tool which I'll demonstrate in a moment, which essentially it's got the unit record data sitting behind it. It allows the user to query that, and as part of that query, behind the scenes, the tool tabulates that data. It applies disclosure control methodology, carries out some checks, and then says to the user, you can have this and you can't have that in terms of what you've asked for. So if hopefully again this will work in terms of being able to see my screen. So it's something to be a nod in terms of its change. So you're now looking at a prototype. Yeah. Can't see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Right. So what I'd ask is if you could not focus too much on the user interface, because that will change. What I'm trying to demonstrate, if you like, is what's happening behind the scenes. So it's the concept of being able to kind of create your own or build your own tables. And the first thing that a user will need to do is to choose what we refer to as a kind of a population or a data set, because we need to be, we need to be careful, if you like, that we don't confuse users, if you like, in terms of some of the data is about households, some of it's about people and so on, and all sorts of odd things transpiring. So we'll group in terms of the data collections, if you like, all these data sets by the population base. So if we select one that's about people, and behind here some synthetic data, it's broadly the right sort of size and shape in terms of what we're producing from the census, but it's synthetic data. So I won't dwell too much on the geography selection. As I said, the user interface will change. But if we select a fairly small area, so lower layer super output areas is around 35,000 of the minimum as well, so they're fairly small. And then if we say we'll get data for each and every one of those. So we're asking now, as we go through the system, we're starting to request tables for each and every of those lower layer super output areas. So if we select something, let's say, which is age, you can see kind of age categories over here, and maybe by economic activity. Now, as soon as I kind of select the second variable, what you'll see over here is it's super quickly tabulated all of that information, carried out that disclosure control methodology, done those checks, and then said, okay, Callum, you can have that data you've requested for most, but not quite all of the areas that you've selected. And as a user, I might say, okay, I want to progress anyway, and also want information, let's say, by health. As I kind of put more requests into it, if you like, in more detail and more topics, my success rate is likely to get lower. But as a user, I can play around, change things and so on, and try and get to the point that I might be happy with. And so, it creates, if you like, a kind of a patchwork availability of data, but the data is deciding, if you like, in terms of the underlying characteristics of the population as to whether it's kind of safe, if you like, for us to provide for those areas. So as a user, I might say, although I've not got complete coverage, I'm really interested in that information for the areas that I can have. So I might progress with that. Just to prove it has done something behind the scenes, here's lots of data, quite a lot of zeros. The other thing I might want to do in terms of kind of prodding and probing in terms of what I can have is maybe to change the geography. So I'll say, for the areas that I can have it for the smaller geographies, that's good, great, I'll take that away. But if I then raised my geography, so in this case perhaps went up to the middle layer super output areas, what's my success rate there? That's better, I'm getting a better coverage. Maybe then if I, for complete coverage, went up to local authority, I'm going to be there or thereabouts. Still not quite there, quite interestingly, see the missing areas. City of London probably expected that, Isles of Scilly perhaps as well, but some others quite interesting in terms of not passing. But hopefully you kind of get the idea and the concept of, you know, being able to kind of prod and probe, and, you know, you've got that flexibility to be able to, you know, make the selections that you need, if you like, and for that to be provided in real time. Alongside that, we've got some, I'll show you some examples of some other products, kind of data visualizations, if you like, that we're looking to build. This actually is built on top of that back end that I just showed you. And this is a tool which enables perhaps a less experienced user to define specific populations that they're interested in, to find out about how that population compares to the kind of the standard population, and also to see the location of that population as far as we can. So if we select some characteristics, so let's say that we're interested in, let's go perhaps religion, and we're interested in people who describe themselves as Muslim. It takes a little while because doing those queries, those data sets, you can kind of quickly see now which define that population. I'll put in another one before I show it in detail. Let's say we're interested in proficiency in English. We might be doing something around those people that can speak no English, because there might be a particular service need. So we're really down to quite a small population, so, you know, less than 1% of the population. But now we're getting to see, in terms of, as I said, kind of where this population, you've got higher numbers of them and low numbers of them. And also, as I said, in terms of the blue bar here shows the information for this group that we've selected against the kind of standard population. So you can see in this case, the health, in terms of those saying they're in good health, is significantly lower than the standard population. So you're getting quite kind of rich information from a fairly straightforward kind of interaction and query. So that's kind of another example of a tool. Here's another of the sorts of things we're looking at. So this is us about kind of producing area reports, in this case, which would describe change over time. So we can select an area. Let's select Gosport, that's where I am. And what it's doing is it's kind of a standard area profile thing where it kind of inserts the numbers into a story, but it's slightly more clever than that in terms of what it's doing behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, it's looking at, you know, what are the characteristics of, in this case, Gosport, which are most different, if you like, to kind of the standard, if you like. Where does it kind of stand out? And then the report that's produced focuses on those aspects. So, you know, saying it's kind of, you know, the density is higher, and then picks up some article, you know, some sections, if you like, which focus on those aspects which make Gosport slightly different, if you like, to standard areas. The last one I want to show you is hidden behind here, so bear with me. Hopefully get in there. There we go. Is the something we're exploring, really early stage, to be honest, around enabling users to define their own areas. So I've got an example here. I'm down in Gosport again, and my example here is there's a small airport here. Perhaps, let's say there was an expansion going on and we need to understand the population around it in terms of how they might be affected. So as a user, I could start drawing an area. Let's say we want to do it quite geographically, if you like, and we might do something a bit more advanced than this in terms of, say, you know, I don't know, 2 miles or whatever around a point. But let's say we're creating that ourselves. We've then drawn an area, and what I should have said, sorry, is the underlying map. You'll see these are the output areas and the population centroids. Yeah. So we've created an area. It's not a great fit, actually, because, you know, a lot of this land around this airport isn't built on. We might say, actually, I'd prefer it if that part wasn't in. That's probably a better fit, perhaps, for our needs. And what it's done is it's created basically a lookup, if you like, to the area that we've drawn on the output areas as the best fit. It's created those, and then what we're exploring is obviously, you know, the user would want some information about that, so to be able to then query the underlying data to kind of, you know, produce data, adding up those output areas into some summary information for that user-defined area. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at and hopefully might be useful. There's others I haven't had time to show you, so more kind of standard area profiles, you know, just to kind of describe this is Manchester and these are the key characteristics. Something called a census atlas, which is, you know, a mapping tool really, so for some high-level indicators, being able to see them on the map and, you know, shading the map according to the levels of the thing you're looking at. And then also some census games aimed more at the citizen, getting them engaged and so on. So there's a kind of a blockbuster type game, if you like, where you travel across England and Wales, you know, predicting whether the population in the next place is higher or lower. So there's a whole range of different kind of products that we're looking at. So that was it, I think, for me in terms of dissemination. I was going to hand over back to Ed, but, you know, more than happy to take questions at the end.
Yeah, well, so I mean, so all I was really going to say here on this slide is that we've made a couple of statements publicly about use that's already been made of preliminary information in support of the Omicron response. There was an urgent piece of analysis produced on based on the preliminary occupations outputs linked to vaccination status. We have also done something very, very recently to support local authorities with potential refugee applications. Obviously, that's a shifting policy area, but at the time there was a suggestion that local authorities would need information on the numbers of Ukrainians already in their areas to support the emerging refugee policy at the time. But clearly, that's changed. So some numbers were produced on that. But you know, it's a really important part of the picture will be you know, insights into life during the pandemic, but we recognize that there will be ongoing shifts and changes in those patterns, and through the work that Vicky's going to cover, need to just reassure you that we are committed through you know, the work of the office to making sure that we are able to comment and provide insight into those kinds of changes. So we do expect clearly that the data is going to show higher numbers of people working from home as a result of the change in patterns. But as you alluded to in the discussion before, even now things are changing as a result of people's response to petrol prices, to domestic fuel bills, whatever it might be. There are a whole bunch of things that are going on that are continuing to influence people's behaviours. So these things never stand still. But through the work that we're planning for in the move towards the use of administrative data and the strategic intention to move away from a traditional census, we hope to be able to provide we intend to be able to provide more regular and ongoing insight into all of the traditional census topics, and the intention is to do that at small area level. So if we move on, I am conscious of your time. Are you comfortable that we carry on talking about what comes next, or do you want to talk about Census 2021?
Well, let's have a discussion about what you already proposed, which seems quite fascinating. Have you got any questions or observations from the group so far? Ian, are you?
Ian had her hand up a while ago.
Okay,
so
right.
I think it looks like a really good visualization tool you've got there to help people interpret the results. I was wondering about the confidentiality rules you apply in terms of what you would show to the public.
Yeah, so in terms of something fairly complicated, I'll try and describe quite quickly. So the underlying disclosure control methodology behind the kind of flexible table builder, as with previous censuses, the main method is record swapping, and that's carried out pre-tabulation. So that happens before me and my team kind of get hands on our data, and that's targeted on fairly unique people and households. And what that does, you know, it's an undisclosed level of swap that we do, but it creates uncertainty. If you think you've found someone, if you like, that you may not have because we might swap them. And then we've got two extra steps which are new, for 2021 and required to enable that flexibility. And the first of those is what's referred to as small cell key perturbation, which is basically smaller numbers, some larger, are adjusted by a small amount. And that creates a little bit of noise in the data. It's not statistically significant, but puts that noise in, and that's done to prevent differencing. Because we're offering that flexibility, the risk is, a naughty user, if you like, could run lots and lots of requests of very similar tables and try and basically reconstruct the unit record data. So we put in that perturbation to avoid that kind of differencing and minimize that risk. The last step is around checks. So there's a number of checks and rules, if you like, in terms of number of variables by area level, amount of sparsity in the data set, and so on. So that's the last stage, and that's what results in that kind of percentage of how many of the areas you've selected that will be made available.
Great. Any other questions, comments, observations?
So my question, I think, was quite similar. So just to quickly add to the end of that, in terms of how that consolidates with your production of the full UK data in spring 2023, presumably then those steps happen before that. So the data that you produce will have the noise in, etc., etc. But is that across all dimensions? Is it a subset of protected dimensions? And how might we, like you said, there's no statistical difference, but at a granular level, is there a way to see information on what's been applied without reducing that anonymity? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's two parts to the question. So in terms of UK outputs, if you're not already aware, there's a UK data user group. I think there's a session next Wednesday. We're starting to talk through around UK totals and what we're providing. But in principle, it's as you described in terms of we'd add up the information from across the UK. And then the number from England and Wales, a number from Northern Ireland, a number from Scotland to get to any UK totals. So it'll be adding up the disclosure controlled outputs from the different countries, which will be slightly different in terms of how the methods that have been applied. I'm just trying to remember the other part. Yeah, in terms of us providing information, we're kind of looking at the moment in terms of how transparent we can be, and we're looking to be quite transparent in terms of those methods. So that's, we're looking to provide as much information as we can without, if you like, kind of letting the cat out of the bag in terms of what the actual methods are by which someone could then, as I said, kind of reconstruct the unit record data. But we're looking to be as transparent as we can.
Thanks. The only other little bit was, is it all dimensions or is it a subset of dimensions that you're obfuscating?
So in terms of the record swapping, that focuses on particular unique characteristics. So that is
Gotcha. Okay.
Targeted. In terms of the perturbation, my understanding, I'm not an expert on this, my understanding is it's looking at the numbers rather than the variable characteristic in terms of how and when it perturbs.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions or observations?
Just ask one final follow-up on that last point. So the perturbation is that done on the fly every time somebody makes a query, or is it fixed? So if I try and cross-tab X with Y or whatever on a Tuesday morning, will I get the same result when I do it again on Wednesday afternoon, or is the perturbation just done on the fly by the system?
It's both. So it is done on the fly, but the methods mean that if you do the same thing at different time period, or you and another user ask the same data, you'll get the same number. So in terms of a single table and the same query, that is true. There's a point where you could sort of, if you like, ask for the same information in two different ways, if you like, through two different kind of data sets where you might get some slight inconsistencies. But generally, the same query run, repeated times will get exactly the same result.
Thank you.
Question about geography. In terms of output areas and super output area variations, will there be any change in the 2021 census to the 2011 census?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that if you want. So in terms of the, you're probably aware that output areas were introduced to support the 2001 census. They came into effect in 2003. And each time we have a census, we have to maintain them. So maintenance means basically there's thresholds in terms of the minimum population and household size and the maximum population and household size for an output area. So we need to look at the data each time we have a census and maintain any output areas that have reached those thresholds. So where it's gone below threshold, we need to merge. So what was one output area is merged with another. So it's kind of, you have still got comparability, but it's kind of 2 to 1. And if it's gone above threshold in terms of over the size, then we look to break that down into a smaller number of output areas. For example, if it's a kind of new housing estate that's being built and there's a huge population that's been introduced. The other thing that we're doing this time, so that's what we did in 2011 as well, and we're doing that in 2021. What we're also doing in 2021, because back in 2003, output areas were also aligned to ward and parish boundaries, is that we're doing a where we can and keeping below that 5%, if you like, amount of change, looking to do some targeted realignment to try and get a good a fit as we can to wards and parishes as well from output areas, because over time, as wards and parishes have changed, sometimes that fit has become quite poor. So in the worst kind of offending cases, we're looking to do some targeted realignment on that as well.
Great.
Cool.
Tim?
And
Yeah, just a couple of one was, it's quite a good observation of how you've been able to improve things over the 10 years. Just the speed of the processing there was very good. But another more specific question was behind the user interface. Will you allow API access? So is there a machine readable process that we could use? Or
Yeah,
is
so
that-
so basically anything that a user can do on the website should be achievable through the API as well.
and so the API will be published.
Yes, yeah. And we're trying to do that principle, if you like, by which our front ends, if you like, are using the same API that we offer to external users as well.
And with the table release, if you like, when the univariate tables are released, will they be released just in bulk as they used to be, or will they be released in the table creator?
So that first phase 1 where we're releasing topic summary data, which is univariate, there's one exception, but generally it's univariate. Obviously that flexibility doesn't come into play because the flexibility
Of course.
But we'll be making that available. We just had a conversation about this morning actually, so definitely down to output area level.
Good.
With the univariate data, generally it's not completely true, but generally it's it's the most detailed versions of those classifications as well. So at that point in time, you're getting a lot of topic detail down to a low geographical detail.
Well, they haven't got the same disclosure risk, have they?
Exactly. Yeah. We're also exploring how wide we can go, if you like, at that point in time. So not only producing kind of OA, LSOA, MSOA, local authority and upwards, but wards and other geographies at that point in time as well.
Further question: are you going to give any support to how we might be able to sort of mitigate the impact of COVID being in place? Are there any ways in which you mentioned students as well? Will you give any guidance on them?
So at the time, yeah, I mean, just very simply as part of the code of practice for official statistics, we have to provide users with information that assists them interpret what they're getting, what they're seeing, but then also from a quality perspective, if there are things that we need to communicate, we will do. There's no, there will be no, we won't be we won't be attempting to just put it out there and allow people to make I don't know, misleading interpretations if there's something that we're aware of that reflects the pandemic that then may be changing quite quickly, then we'll need to draw people's attention to that.
Yeah, I'm part of the origin destination working group. Part of
Great.
being Doug, and as you can imagine, that's been a topic of conversation in there because the impact of COVID on that particular data set is going to be quite significant.
No,
Thanks very much.
no, that's right. No, great. Now, conscious of time, so there are a few slides about sort of, as you know, us heading towards a 2023 recommendation on the future of the census and the work that's underway on our kind of strategic transformation towards the use of admin data. We could talk about that another time if you so wished. Just up to you.
I'm keen to hear it, but I don't know about the rest.
I'm keen to hear it.
Yeah, me too.
I think that would be a very good idea, actually.
So
if
oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, workplace statistics, for example, knowing where workers are is going to become a more important issue into the future. Heavens knows how one will collect that data or use the current data, I don't know, but then that's an exciting opportunity, as one says. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah, no, absolutely. I agree.
Still.
If Vicky
Okay,
if Vicky's still online, then
I am.
she can whiz through some slides.
Yeah, so I'll be very quick, and we've been, as Ed said, we'd be more than happy to come back and talk to you later in the year or whenever's best for you about more in detail about our transformation plans. But as you've all talked about, the experience of the last 2 years with the pandemic, it's changed the way that we use data, and our users need more frequent, more detailed, more timely updates with that information that we get from census to kind of be able to kind of meet their needs. And what we're aiming to do is, in the longer term, to move towards a population and migration system that will deliver those things, starting off kind of small and increasing in breadth and detail over the years as we get more and more data. Kind of, if we could go to the next slide. So what could this new system look like? We want to do that quicker and more frequent population and migration statistics, and we're using admin data and other sources, surveys and commercial data to kind of be able to get us into that place where we can do more than we can at the moment in the intercensal period. But in terms of what that may look like, it might be that we're moved more towards a model where we have kind of a provisional and final estimates model, where we produce these provisional estimates as close as to the reference date as possible based on the best available data at the time. And then when we do get more data in, where we're able to kind of improve the quality and the kind of the accuracy, we can then produce final estimates. And we're looking, we obviously need to understand more about the new data sources that are available, and by comparing what we're able to do at the moment with in our research that we've been producing with the outcomes from Census 2021. And over the next year or so, we'll be kind of setting that out and inviting all of our users to kind of get involved and give us their feedback about what they think about what we're able to do at the moment. But what it's coming down to really is going to be that us trying to find that optimal trade-off between those more timely provisional estimates and the increased accuracy of that as we get more and more data. And what we're aiming to do is to, as we do this research, to take it from kind of an experimental status to be able to embed things as we go into our official statistics to get those richer and more detailed and more timely statistics that we know you need. If you could just move on, Callum. So you may be familiar with some of the research that we've been doing on population and social statistics. So over the last few years, we've been producing admin-based population estimates, which we do by creating by applying rules to data sources to kind of optimize the coverage and the accuracy that we're able to get. So our recent work has been about understanding the stability of the rules that we're using over a time series from 2016 to 2019 and across different population groups and geographies. And over the next year, we're planning on further improving the measures that we've got already by refining those methods, including those new data sources and using Census 2021 to understand the coverage patterns in our admin-based population estimates and how we can improve them going forwards. So we go to the next slide, please. And just coming back to that kind of theme around the pandemic, our work on the admin-based migration estimates, or ABMEs, has also been accelerated by the challenges of COVID-19, with the suspension of the International Passenger Survey, or IPS, in right at the very beginning in March 2020. We've had to very quickly move to using administrative data to model migration statistics, which are also that important part and component that feeds into our official population statistics, our midyear estimates. And we're kind of moving away from that intention-based IPS survey data to the administrative data. There are some challenges in that because it means that we need to wait longer before the observed data shows us that someone is a long-term international migrant based on the definitions that we're currently doing. And as a result of the changes to the data sources in our methods, we're also investigating different ways and alternative ways of defining migration. And there's a lot of conversations that will be going on over the next year or so in that space. If you go to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but it's really kind of just, this slide just sets out in a bit more detail about how we're going to get to those kind of provisional and final estimates. And we're exploring three main approaches. The first of those is the 100% cohort, which would allow us to look, linking kind of everything together longitudinally. That would allow us to look at kind of the longitudinal outcomes, which users have also said we really want to be able to kind of see change over time. Why we say replenishing there, we're talking there about adding in immigrants and births, taking out immigrants and deaths. So we're hoping to maintain the representativeness of the population at any point in time. That second kind of stream, the demographic accounting, that's working at the aggregate level and integrates the stock and flow measures that make them coherent across time. What it's really allowing us to do is allow us to use the incomplete data and allow for error and bias in the sources. And the third one is that ABPE approach, the admin-based population estimates that I just talked about. It uses the same data as that we're proposing for that 100% longitudinal cohort and the demographic accounting, but it's really exploiting the activity that we see in the admin data by those interactions with services so that we know someone is actually there in a particular place, to estimate the population and to really kind of understand any discrepancies that emerge between these three different distinct estimation approaches so that we can understand it. We're working at the moment about how that new demographic counting approach could work with everything else that we're doing. And what we're really trying to aim to do is to use these different perspectives on the same data to borrow strength across an integrated design as a whole to really kind of improve, as Ed was mentioning, the quality of what we're able to do. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So just very briefly, some of the things that we've also been doing, it's not just about the population estimates, we're also trying to improve our social statistics as well. So we've been doing what we call feasibility research and research outputs. So recently we've published research on admin-based ethnicity statistics. It's a bit of a mouthful. So that's using data like hospital episode statistics, other health data sets and school census data, linking those to our admin-based population estimates to produce these estimates that are just based from the admin data. And we're looking at the coverage of the sources, comparing it with 2011 census and kind of looking around the data quality. And one of the reasons that we're really kind of focusing in on this as well at the moment is in the pandemic, we use data on ethnicity from the 2011 census. We want to be able to produce that kind of information more quickly than kind of the decennial census at the moment. We're also doing research on housing stock characteristics. So last week we published something using VOA data. There's a blog on the National Statistical blog about, do you know the difference between a semi-detached and a terraced house? So it's looking at how we can use the VOA Valuation Office Agency data to improve what we can do in our existing statistics, reuse it in surveys and kind of add to what we're doing. We could go to the next slide, please. Again, these are just other examples. We've got overcrowding, and one that everyone's always very interested in is the admin-based income statistics research. That's where we're combining HMRC and DWP data, linking to our admin-based population and household estimates that we're trying to produce individual and household net income estimates at LSOA level. So our latest update on that research was in December, and when we share the slides, there is a big long list of links for all of the kind of the latest research. If you could go to the next slide, please, Callum. Unfortunately, though, we know that we're not going to be able to get everything through the administrative data, because there's some things that it just doesn't collect or it doesn't work as well for. And this is just a list here, particularly religion, kind of identity, and kind of some of the things around care, which are really important. So we're also at the same time working with data suppliers across government and other areas to understand the feasibility of collecting these topics in the future. And if we can't do that, then the other alternative is looking at how we can use large-scale surveys or even another census to kind of meet these needs. And this will all factor into the recommendation that we're going to make at the end of next year, at the end of 2023, on the future of population, migration and social statistics system. Go to the next slide. This is just kind of like a timeline that shows the kind of, this isn't something new that we're doing. This is something that I'm sure you're familiar with. We've been working on for a very long time. We had the Beyond 2011 programme and the recommendation in 2014 that the government's response to was actually censuses after 2021. They want us to be trying to do by alternative means than the kind of traditional census. Since then, we've set out what we're trying to do in our white paper. We've had the Digital Economy Act, which has given us those pathways for sharing data across government. And we're really just in the next year or so, really trying to move on with that engagement and really start to, obviously with the excitement of all the great census stuff that Callum and Ed have talked about today, we want to be building on that and making sure that we are taking our users with us on that transformation journey to kind of what the future might hold, and make sure that they have all the opportunities to kind of be back on the research we're doing and get involved in the conversation about what that system needs to look like in the future. So, as I said, that's the big long list of things that we'll share, and yeah, happy to come back and talk to you all later when we have more information to share as well. Are there any questions on that? That was a very brief kind of run through quite a lot of content as well. So
Well, thank you very much, Vicky. And or any of that presentation?
I've got a question, but I realise
No
Tim's
hands
had it.
going up. Or my Tim, yes.
Okay, couple things.
Tim.
I am unmuted out here. Vicky, I'm really pleased actually that you carried on leaving the option for another census in, because my concern was that actually that horse had bolted. So I'm very keen for you to advise us on who else we can lobby to try and help them realise, whilst there's huge benefits to be had from filling in the gaps inside the 10 years, that ability to baseline against something like a census, I think, can get lost. And it's particularly, I think, whilst there's clearly some things you just can't ask questions of in the administrative data, and that's clearly a gap. What concerns me is people's lack of appreciation of the interaction between data and that ability to ask a question where you're linking together the variety of things that you may well be able to capture in different administrative sets, but you don't get that interaction of one person at one time joining all those records together. And I know that's a subtle thing that analysts appreciate, but others won't. And presenting lots of univariate comparisons misses that point.
yes, it's a really important point, and that's something that we're trying to address in some of the research that we're doing going forwards. I mean, in terms of the options for what that recommendation is, we need to be proposing what is going to best meet user needs, and that's something that we want to make sure that we are doing that in the most efficient and effective way that gives us the best quality statistics in the most timely fashion. In terms of that kind of that multivariate, it's really the multivariate nature of the data that you're talking about. That's where we're hoping that 100% longitudinal cohort approach that I really kind of very quickly October. So having that is basically kind of trying to get that information together so that we would be able to kind of have some of that information. But there's also other programs of work that's going on in ONS at the moment. We've got the integrated data service, which is looking across government about trying to bring data together to be able to do exactly what you're saying, be able to kind of look at that kind of one person and all those different aspects. And in our research that we're doing at the moment, we are moving towards producing research outputs on that are kind of multivariate. So we're looking at producing things like income by ethnicity to demonstrate that we can or could be able to produce some of the kind of types of statistics that you get from a census, or even more because you don't get income on a census, to kind of demonstrate that, almost kind of like the proof of concept that we can do this if we've got the data available.
The only reason I was going to, sorry if I interrupted it, but what makes me hesitate about that way of solving the problem is that you then start to get into potential data privacy issues about if you get a system where the government has created a database where it knows everything about every individual all the time. Some people might be fine about that, and I guess some analysts might be fine about that, but I have some nervousness. So the idea that you only connect things once every 10 years feels useful, if you like, and there's risks in around
Yes.
that. I mean, I'm not the most strongly advocating of that, but other people will shout loudly about that, won't they?
So we're absolutely very conscious of those things, and as you've talked about the statistical disclosure control, we put all of those same issues and kind of concerns and considerations in place for the work that we do with the admin data. And actually a lot of the previous work that we've done has been using anonymized data, so only researchers and analysts will see the information that they need for the research that they have. We're also working, there's a cross-government kind of programme being stood up at the moment to look at the public acceptability of the use of data. We're trying to join up and make sure that we are talking about all of these issues, especially where we've come through the pandemic, where being able to link all of that data, in some cases very sensitive data around health, is of really key importance to be able to kind of deliver the services and make those decisions that people need. So it is going to be an ongoing conversation, and these are exactly the kind of issues that we're really encouraging people to engage with where we do research. You mentioned as well about how people would be able to feed in. We are kicking off kind of over the next year. We'll be doing looking to do a lot of engagement and talking with people like yourselves and users about what their concerns are, what the opportunities that you're seeing, and kind of how what we're proposing is going to meet your needs. So I would be really keen within my role to kind of have some discussions outside the meeting about how we can kind of involve your group in feeding into that. But we're also planning on doing a kind of wider, more consultative exercise ahead of the recommendation. So there will be those kind of opportunities to feed in.
So again, with
Thank you
the
very much.
other people need time.
Ian, I think you're the next person asking a question.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Vicky, to what extent will there be alignment between ONS for England and Wales and then Scotland and Northern Ireland in whatever you decide, whatever approaches you decide to take forward?
So we do keep in touch with, we are working with our colleagues in NRS and NISRA, and with Wales as well, because we've got the responsibility for England and Wales. But a lot of the data sets that we've been talking about, admin data, are devolved. So we're working very closely with Wales to try and get access to kind of those data at the moment. I don't know, Ed, if you have, because you're more involved with some of those discussions.
Yeah, well, I was
at
going
the
to
UK
come in.
level.
I was going to come in there. So the decision making will be a devolved matter. So the NRS for Scotland have responsibility for fulfilling census obligations. Clearly, they're busy with the 2021 or 2022 census, I should say, at the moment, and I think they have made it. I think they said something recently in a response to or an appearance at a Scottish Government committee hearing that they would turn their attention similarly to ONS to the future shortly after including the 2022 census. Northern Ireland, I don't think have said much at all about an admin data future. So there are some risks, I think, ahead in terms of potential devolved decision making. But whatever the future holds, we will do our utmost to make sure the needs of UK data users are met. And I think the group that Callum mentioned will have an important future beyond making sure that we've got comparable 2021 statistics. That will be an important group for the continued user needs of UK data users. But it will be a devolved decision.
Right.
So the possibility of divergent approaches and methods is a very real one.
Yes.
Run their one in 2021. That's a big example, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we take
Okay,
Stevie's,
thank you very much.
Stevie's question now?
Thanks. A couple of questions. So a quick one first. In terms of erroneous or false provision of data by individuals in the census, what, if any, automated or other mitigation techniques are deployed to protect against that? I'll leave that one first. I do have a second question though.
Okay, so
for Callum or for
in terms of 2021 data,
yeah.
So as part of our checks, I mean, we've got a bunch of basic quality assurance checks that look towards making sure that there are not things like 3-year-old doctors and just basic kind of consistency, coherence checks, plausibility checks like that. But I guess we do have to accept the possibility that that people have the opportunity to take their user access code that they were provided with, and so long as it was plausible and coherent, there is always the danger of completely false records being made. Where I mean, we've certainly detected in our checks where we have got multiple responses for single addresses. So you can probably guess that there are certain addresses in the country that there are people out there who were able to go onto the online system and complete multiple responses for, and we've been able to weed out those. I probably need to come back to you, Stevie, with a more detailed answer if that's something that you are interested in terms of exactly what measures are in place.
But always interested, to be honest. But in terms of what I was actually getting at, that makes a lot of sense. I would assume the majority of other error would fall into statistical insignificance because it'd have to be coordinated otherwise, right? So thank you for that. Second question was about I don't know what the perception of responsibility would be, but in terms of providing things like the univariate analysis and access, you had your user profiles. So on the right hand side of that, access to that UI that Callum showed with regards to being able to get data out and put data in. As you move towards the right of your user profiles, the rigor or best practice when it comes to handling data and drawing conclusions obviously goes away. And with the prevalence of social media being significantly different to 2011 and certainly 2001, what mitigation, if any, or guidance would there be in that UI or in that provision of data to stop people drawing the wrong conclusions? And is that the responsibility at all of the ONS? And what do we think about that as a group?
You want me to start, I guess, in terms of the as I described a bit earlier, we target different products to different types of users. So, you know, where we've got perhaps the less informed, if you like, we'll do a lot more hand holding and explaining and try and make sure the statistics are properly understood. That's obviously not fail safe. There's nothing to stop, if you like, you know, passive citizen stumbling across a kind of flexible table builder and playing around. So I think we do what we can, I think, but I guess there's a limit, I think, in terms of being able to control, if you like, in terms of how the data is interpreted and so on. The only other thing, I guess, in terms of we've focused a lot on the data, what we haven't covered so much is the analysis work that accompanies this. So there's a whole range of analysis products that will be produced, which again look to, you know, tell the insights, tell the stories, to mean, if you like, that, you know, people hopefully will those, if you like, perhaps less informed users will probably see those first, if you like, and draw their conclusions from that rather than need to go to first principles.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think we should end this section, interesting and fascinating though it's been, and thank you all, Callum, Ed, and Vicky, for spending so much time and doing it so interestingly.
I was going to say, I think that first slide, which showed that you got virtually 90% of people responding to the survey, is a brilliant result. Must have lots of benefits to the budget as well. And doing it again. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we are, you know, confident but not complacent about the census. I mean, I think all the signs are there that we have got a fantastic baseline for whatever the journey forward looks like.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for doing that. I think we got half an hour beyond our agenda point, so I think you shouldn't take any more questions on the census now. But thank you. If you want to go on, Tim.
No, I'm trying to switch it off. That's just technical incompetence.
Okay. You're on next, actually, Tim. So.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Thanks all.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for spending the time with us. Bye bye.